behind time. So I'll quickly ask Mary from Farm Africa to come up. Mary Nyale, Brian Ocheng, who's an investor. Sophia, please come back to the panel. Michael and Vivian. So this next session is really, it's called a whole grain thought and moving the agenda forward. I hope there's an extra seat for me there. Is there? No. I would have preferred to sit down. But anyway, so this last part is really to invite you as the experts. You've heard what the panelists have spoken, some of the questions from the crowd, to talk about the new ideas that are coming from here and how we take this agenda forward. For those that haven't yet introduced themselves, and I think that would be Mary and Brian Ocheng, please do say something about yourself just before you speak. So for Mary, what are some of the key, some of your key thoughts and lessons in supporting the adoption of innovations around sustainable farming practices, particularly the youth and women? Let's look at the issue of regenerative agriculture and the nexus with renewable energy.
Thank you very much, Hassan. My name is Mary Nyale. I work as the country director for Farm Africa, and I give technical expertise and backstopping to the technical team, and of course, giving oversight to the operations. And thank you for the question. I am very cognizant, or we are very cognizant of the fact that our smallholder farmers or the farmers are very much knowledgeable in terms of the sustainable farming practices. And we go in working with them knowing that they have a level of knowledge, and ensuring that we look at what are the gaps that are within their various aspects in terms of sustainable farming practices. And speaking directly to youth and women, as Hassan has asked, number one is that in terms of regenerative agriculture practices or sustainable farming practices, context-specific solutions have been discussed here. And this is a very pertinent area in terms of looking at various agroecological zones and what kind of mix of these practices that would work in those specific local contexts. And so that is one area that we have seen it working in terms of ensuring that we are able to identify what are the mixes of these farming practices that would be able to ensure productivity and also use of the practices. And number two, investing in capacity building. We recognize that all farmers, as I said, already have the knowledge, but what are these gaps that we want to address in terms of properly improving or use of the technologies or innovations that are within the regenerative agriculture practices, and also ensuring that information is available. And so investing in capacity building is very key, especially for the youth, their hunger for information and how to use it. And so if this is available for them through trainings in various forms, then they are able now to conceptualize and to know how best to use this information. And seeing is believing. And so use of demonstrations is very key because that helps to give them confidence in terms of they're able to visualize, they're able to conceptualize the impact of these practices. And so it eases adoption and uptake and adoption of the practices. The other thing is that for the youth, it will be very hard to engage youth if you don't show them where the money is. And so market access, we have realized that market access to the commodities that they grow through these various practices is very key. And they need to see where the money is coming in. And of course, looking at ensuring that there's proper linkages There's linkages to both input and output market systems. That is very key. They need to know where they're getting their inputs, what are the costs in terms of engaging that, and also where are they selling, what are the channels that they're able to use to be able to comfortably engage in sustainable farming. The other thing also we need to look at is mentorship and role models, especially for the youth, in engaging in RA practices and adopting that. Youth are very dynamic. They have a lot of energy and a lot of innovative ideas that they have. And so in terms of sustainability and also being consistent and also being engaged in the various value chains, mentorship is very key. What we have realized is that you cannot work with youth in a community, 100% youth. You need some older people within the groups for mentorship, for morale, for support, access to resources. They don't have land. They'll need to engage their father and other people to get access to land and also other inputs. So mentorship is very key. Peer learning and exchange visit is also very key for the youth to be able to see how is this working in other areas. How can they be able to explore? The other last thing is that collaboration and partnerships. We have seen, we are engaging youth to be able to engage in, say, agribusiness. But then we find out that we see a lot of youth working in silos, and yet they can be able to, we can be able to help them to network and synergize their skills, so that then we are able to build a strong business case within the agricultural value chains for them to participate in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Very elaborate response. A lot of moving pieces, yep. Quite complex.
Yep.
Now, as a kid growing up, I remember watching TV, and there was a lot of emphasis on investors. And I always used to wonder, what is this investor? What does an investor look like? Today with Brian Odeng, that's what an investor looks like. Hearing from, different panelists, people in the audience, this is a complex kind of environment. Are there any business cases you can refer to? What are the opportunities? How do we bring in young people? How do we make this viable for investment?
Is it on? Yeah, so maybe first introduction, Brian from Acumen Investment Team. I work in the East Africa portfolio, and we collaborate closely with portfolio teams in West Africa as well and across the globe. It might be worth introducing first our investment strategies and how that ties into the conversation today. Acumen invests energy and agriculture through two different strategies. Energy strategy, we work closely with IKEA to develop the Productive Use of Energy Initiative Plus, so we call PEI Plus. Plus is just the plus is just, is this better? The plus is just an addendum to a previous strategy, and the energy strategy we have focuses on building businesses that are offering clean energy solutions to farmers and small businesses. We've recently launched a new agriculture strategy called Trellis, and Trellis is now the smallholder farmer component of that. And Trellis focuses on building livelihoods, incomes, and resilience of smallholder farmers. So yeah, Trellis named that way, as the name suggests, it's because it's a systems-based approach to investing. So, and in region, we acknowledge that these are systemic challenges farmers face, and you don't invest in single solutions. So we look for businesses that are offering a system of solutions, creating markets, products, and services for farmers. So both strategies are very interlinked, and they meet in the same way energy and ag are being discussed to meet at a nexus. Yeah, and we have many portfolio companies that are actually at the nexus of energy and ag. Business case for farmers, to your question, they're very clear. Farmer earns more income, you have healthier soils, you have more productive farms, and from a productive use of energy aspect, you have the technology which increases productivity. And then also, to points made earlier, you use less fertilizer in the long run. Fertilizer now is 20% of the cost of farmers. inputs on average, and can range much higher. And in the long run, they actually use less of that and use less pesticides, so it's actually efficient from a farmer's perspective. The income and the cost for a farmer is also more stable because he's less vulnerable to price fluctuations in fuel or fertilizer costs. As we saw last year, there was a fertilizer supply issue, and many farmers were affected. So there's a clear case, or business case for the farmer as well. He also gets to tap into markets with higher premiums. From an enterprise level, the business case, of course, is having consistency in supply. Not to mention names, but there are many logistics companies that have tried to source from smallholder farmers at scale and have struggled because the quality of supply that they get is volatile. And this is a challenge we've all seen. And what Regen does actually stabilize the quality and the predictability of supply, allows businesses to tap into smallholder farmer sourcing at scale. So there's a huge business case there.
And how do you actually bring investment? Do you bring a pot of money? Do you identify anchor companies? Do you buy out companies that supply pumps? What does the investment actually look like in a case like this?
So we take direct investments in either debt or equity into businesses that are leveraging smallholder farmers to support their business. And yeah, we typically accompany that with technical assistance support to achieve some of these gaps in Regen Ag. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Brian. Very interesting perspectives there. I'd like to go back to Sophia, who I've worked with from the FOLU perspective in building multi-sector, multi-partner platforms for initiatives, development initiatives. What are your learnings from that perspective, and what can we bring into this area where we're putting more or less two siloed practices into one? The microphone, please. I think you need, yeah.
Okay, two examples from Ethiopia. Because advancing sustainable or regenerative agriculture commercialization needs multi-stakeholder engagement, because there are different sets of skills that is needed. We are also working with, because we have 95% of our economy is controlled again by the government. We are still operating in that space. We needed to also negotiate a lot in terms of how things need to happen in Ethiopia. So in consultation with the Ministry of Agriculture, again, there is a final decision that we need to have other stakeholders to come on board. And with the leadership of them, actors in this space, regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture, climate smart agriculture, agroecology, all those actors, they think that contributing to sustainable agriculture came on board, which was not part of the Food and Land Use Coalition, Action Coalition for Sustainable Regenerative Agriculture. They all come on board, and then agreement has been reached again that we need to establish a national platform under the leadership of the Ministry of Agriculture. So we are now in a process of facilitating for the establishment of that platform. There is a recognition that we need to bring multiple actors to this table in order to manage that one. We also learned through the process that this multi-stakeholder engagement or multi-actors is more functional, more effective in terms of producing action plans, strategies, principles, definitions. However, as we are moving to implementation phase, we are now more focusing on socializing, consensus building, power dynamism among this. So we need to have again, we understand more that planning, implementation of having the stakeholder, multi-stakeholder is more easy than when we go to implementation. So this is one insight from Ethiopia that, as we move to implementation, we start learning that we need new set of skill in terms of managing this multi-stakeholder. And there is also a support from the government that we need to have this platform come together and negotiate in terms of, but everyone still need to work on silos. Like the agroecology team wants to push for agroecology. Those NGOs are working on climate change, wants climate smart agriculture, still wants to be remaining good. So those things need to be very well socialized under the umbrella of this sustainable regenerative agriculture. So this is something that I would like to share.
Thank you so much, Sophia. And I asked that question. There was someone who asked, the gentleman asked about how do we bring in government into these discussions. And I think bringing together platforms, a facilitator to put together these platforms, bringing multiple actors together to try and solve these development challenges. So thank you very much for that insight. Michael, back to you again. Markets. We've heard markets. I think almost everybody has spoken about markets from a price side, demand side, supply side. How do we support markets to work? How do we create demand and supply and actually sustain it and have these initiatives pan out in the communities and farmers?
Yep. I think for creating markets, I mean, I'm going to give an example. When Lighting Global and Lighting Africa started, I think most of you know about Lighting Africa, Lighting Global, an initiative by the World Bank IFC. When it started, there was a very, it was very challenging. You know, people are shifting from using kerosene lamps for lighting, and now people now are starting to adopt, things like solar lighting systems and solar lanterns. But the market was challenging at the time. People couldn't even afford a $4 lamp, then. But then you bring in these private sector players, the IFC, the banks, and you saw, especially companies like M-Copper and D-Light and Sun King, Green Light Planet really coming up and, kind of transforming the market. And my message here is we need to have an enabling system. At least for Kenya, one of the things that people say drove the market is the fact that we have mobile money. Mobile money is a major driver for pay as you go, for people to make their payment plans, and also the government enabling system. The government is the policies that the government have in place, and for productive use of renewable energy, one of the challenges that we have today is actually, and I think Sisti mentioned this, is a healthy installation, servicing, and maintenance ecosystem. As you said, $600, $700, $800 investment, and then after a few months it breaks down. You are not going to be happy about that, especially if you're a farmer, and this is what you depend on for your livelihood. So having people who can fix these products, having standards in place that can make sure that the products coming into a market, they meet a certain quality standards, that they meet the minimum energy performance standards, and at least what we have, like the Verasol and the formerly known as the Lighting Global Quality Assurance, is what is trying to to get quality products into a market to avoid that market spoilage. And lastly, I just want to emphasize on the issue of just private sector. As AGRA or as maybe like a LICO Foundation, you can't do everything. You want to provide technologies, you don't want to provide agronomy services, you don't want to provide access to market. Other players have to come into the fold and provide these services. And one of the examples that we have, at least in Kenya, that I've seen working quite well is SocoFresh. SocoFresh, they provide the technology. People store their avocados all in the cold rooms, but somebody else pays the customers or pays the farmers, and somebody else is going to come in and provide the farmers with these extension services, like, well, this is how you grow your avocados, this is how we're going to make sure that you have like 90 to 95% acceptance of your avocado. So just having that enabling system for farmers, I mean, that is going to grow the market. If you have access to water, then irrigation can grow. Like we said, water harvesting, people have access to water. Then if you and your products, you and your pumps, you can come in and pretty much everyone is going to want to use your pump at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that. We've heard about private sector markets. Vivian, policy. What do we need to do on policy? What can organizations such as yours put on the table? Please, 2 minutes.
Yes, I'll keep it really short and sweet. For us, I'll start with what we are doing about it. The first thing we're doing is generating insights and research to show the connection between these two systems, to show the trade-offs, because there are trade-offs, to show the synergies and potential areas for collaboration within governments, but with others. Even let's be real, even governments can't do it alone. They need other partners like ours. So we're trying to do that. And then the second thing we're trying to do is to change that narrative. The narrative that we need to rely on fossil-based inputs. You heard from the farmer here. The cost, it's prohibitive for farmers. And even when they get debt and the harvest is not commensurate with the inputs, they are at a loss. So how do we drive insights, drive narratives to help governments move towards low input agriculture? Because even from the conversations we've had at AGRF so far, clearly there's a narrative that we need to push more and more inputs, more and more debt, more and more finance, and there is an alternative. So how do we elevate the alternatives that are already available? And that's what, for us as an alliance, we're prioritizing, making sure that we're putting the right narratives on the table. And then finally, we're also trying to galvanize philanthropic commitment and coordination towards regenerative and agroecological approaches, because we believe that this is a space that has a lot of potential. Philanthropic resources can be used to de-risk. It can also be used to catalyze and get governments on board, because in many cases, even for the inorganic fertilizers, a lot of the movements many years ago were driven by philanthropic support, and now our members are realizing there is potential in regenerative ag, and how can we scale that up? So that's something we hope to pursue. And once we have that catalysis from our members and philanthropy, then hopefully that would transition into policies that governments can implement. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insights. I'd like to share a short experience in my work in Kenya, where we're working with a lot of government. But when we met some of the politicians, they told us that these policies come to us in Parliament for us to ratify. So don't forget us in the awareness raising, capacity building. Just a point that I learned how to move things forward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this panel. Please give them a big round of applause. I'd like to call upon, please take your seats, Simon O'Connell and Marilla Bereza. Simon is the CEO for SNV, and Marilla is working with the IKEA Foundation. I've heard a number of people say IKEA. Please be reminded it is the IKEA Foundation. Please don't forget foundation. So let me start with Simon to give his 5 minutes closing remarks, and then we'll finish off with you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Tough to summarize that in a bit under 5 minutes, but I'll try and keep us to time. Huge thank you, particular thanks. Yes, Nico, we started later than millions of farmers, but we still started early. So thank you to all of you who did arrive early. I'm going to be a little bit alliterative in my summary remarks and go with five C's, maybe even a six. But the 5 C's as I see them for my summary were, Vivian, that changing the narrative, I think that's, and that question that, sir, you asked around, so is it more synthetic fertilizers, that's the pathway to increasing those yields, and then indeed that question of is yields the primary metric here, or is it healthy diet? So changing that narrative, the C of change there, and I thought the framing, Vivian, around, I think you had whose narrative counts. Some of us will remember Robert Chambers and that famous book, Whose Reality Counts, from over 20 years ago. So putting that front and center. Then there's linked to how do you change the narrative? That point around clear evidence, the need to generate that clarity of evidence. And again, turning to you, Vivian, that point around getting the evidence to the right people, so the communications element there, and getting the evidence into the policy shapers, the policy holders, the duty bearers, as it were. So clear evidence. Then, and Sophia, thank you for your remarks. You said it extremely well. The need for collaboration, the need for those public-private partnerships, the need for all of us to step out of our silos and our boxes, Ilko, as you put it, and forge those deeper collaborations and alliances across different sectors. So that's the third C, collaboration. Fourth C, context specific. And I know we're all hearing this through the course of this very important summit. But really ensuring we're listening to those living in context. And at SMV, frankly, as a global development partner, that's how we derive our legitimacy, by really being embedded in the communities and contexts where we do our work and listening intently to those differences and those nuances in those different contexts. So context, fourth C. Fifth C, catalytic capital, and perhaps this is where the IKEA Foundation in particular can come in. And Nico, how wonderful, and thank you for hearing you say right at the beginning, let's embrace the opportunity to fail sometimes. Goodness, we don't hear that enough from some of our partners. Doesn't mean we're going to fail or intent on failing from the outset, but of course we're dealing with very, very complex issues here. So we need to pilot, we need to test, we need to iterate, we need to innovate, and with all of that comes failure. And catalytic or more patient forms of capital give us the space as those practitioners on the ground to do that piloting and that testing, because we know we're not on a linear journey here. We know we have much that we need to figure out, and that requires those more patient or catalytic forms of finance. And then maybe, if I may, just before I turn to you, Marilea, the point around complexity. This is a vastly complex subject, and some of you will know in English that phrase, you can't see the forest for the trees. And as I think about systems change or systems transformation with this metaphor, the metaphor here, the forest is the system, yeah? And you need to take a systems approach when dealing with something as complicated and important as regenerative agriculture. But just to turn the metaphor around for a second, I worry at times as we all think really deeply around that complexity of systems change, that at times do we also ensure that we see the trees for the forest, the trees for the forest, and in this case the trees are the people. And I think what many of our organizations are grappling with is, yes, we know we need to engage in more systemic approaches. Yes, we know we need to be less siloed. Yes, we know we need to step out of our project boxes. But in doing all of that, and in embracing that complexity and that need or that urgency for us to go to scale, let's not lose sight of those trees. Let's not lose sight of those people. Let's not lose sight of the need for really meaningful, inclusive, participatory processes. So let's not lose sight of the trees as we pursue those big, complex forest systems that we're working on. So thank you very, very much, and I'll now hand over to our good friends at the IKEA Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, and you just made my job so easy. I think you read my notes, so I'm going to skip the summation and go straight into gratitude. I am so honored to be here representing the foundation, and in gratitude to our partners who have joined us today in their leadership in this space. Humbled by everything that we were able to learn today, and excited to make an invitation to all of us, an invitation that we make to ourselves at the IKEA Foundation every day. We know that this food systems transformation is indeed a complex challenge, but we do also know that there is no going back In fact, there is not even staying where we are, right? We're going into the future. So how might we really embrace the fact that we don't have all the answers just yet? How might we, in the discomfort of not having all the answers just yet, stay in the inquiry of how do we do this right for the future generations? So at the IKEA Foundation, we are very committed to supporting that transformation, the food systems transformation, and to make sure that we can provide for people in a way that works with nature, so we can build more resilient livelihoods for the very people who are actually going to be suffering the burden of the climate impact, the climate crisis that we have coming our way. With that, I mean, we are excited to be supporting a lot of the context-specific evidence, research, and data. Thank you, Vivian, for bringing up the point around the politics of knowledge. Who defines knowledge? Who defines the narratives that we are all adopting as, no pun intended, our holy cows? So I think challenging ourselves to, again, stay in the discomfort of not knowing everything just yet, but continuing to bet on an integrated nature, people, climate approach to food systems transformation is, in effect, in my mind and in my heart, the only sane option, right? So let's stay with it. And thank you to our partners, thank you to SNV and team and our co-hosts, and excited to see how this conversation evolves over the next few days. And I know we are out of time. I think we all have to move to the next session. So I look forward to seeing you all.
Thank you, everyone. I think that's the end of the session. For those that have a minute, they can come here and we have a group picture. For those that cannot, please enjoy the rest of your day.